Jim, thank you very much. That was where are you? It was great sharing there. And I think sets the stage perfectly for what we're going to talk about next on our next panel, which is about a practical example in a sporting context of how a sporting organization has embraced purpose at the center of its DNA and how it's driven every single decision that we've made. Joining us today, and maybe you can just come up in order, Kamba Tshionyi, come and join me please. Kamba is chairman of the 50 Fund. Please give him a round of applause. Kamba is, I didn't know that you had done so much when I read your bio, so you've actually got quite an impressive background.
That's because you haven't introduced the other folks yet.
Not at all. Kamba is a senior executive at JP Morgan. He is somebody that has sat on both sides of the fence. He's worked on the non-profit sector with various different organizations. He was a basketball player. He captained the Stanford team in 1998, I believe.
To the Final Four.
To the Final Four, there we go. Just to make that point. And he's got a degree from the London School of Economics, and is a chartered philanthropy advisor.
Yeah.
Chartered
advisor in philanthropy.
I didn't know such a thing existed, so there we go.
You can pay for anything.
So, Kamba, it's great to have you with us here today. Also joining us from Levi's is Bergh. Chip, if you come up and join us, that'd be great. And you heard a little bit about Chip from Jim earlier on, but for those of you that don't know, Levi's is a huge organization, some great brands like Levi's and Dockers. Chip is somebody who was really interested in watching you listen to Jim because there was a lot of head nodding going on.
Well, I know the whole story. I've known Jim for 35 years or something, so it's great to see him.
So we won't dig into any of the bad stories or what stays on tour stays on tour. Also, Levi's are a major partner of the host committee. They're a founding legacy partner. Guys like Chip, organizations like Levi's have made this all possible. You can have a vision, you can have a strategy, you can have a culture, but if you don't have any cash to implement it, it's really tough. So thank you for that, Chip and Levi's, that's great. And Keith is going to be joining us any minute now. Keith is the CEO of the Super Bowl host committee, doing what CEOs of host committees do, dealing with a crisis right now, but he'll be joining us any minute, and that'll be great to have him be part of this. So that's him there. It's just he needs 2 stools. He's good.
We should make a little more room.
Yeah. Perfect. There we go. So I'd worked out this whole way how we're going to have this discussion, and it was going to start with Keith. But since Keith's not here, Kamba, I'm going to start with you. And we've heard this word legacy used a lot, and it's kind of a foundational element of Super Bowl 50 from a host committee perspective. Tell us why you got engaged in this initiative and what experiences you've had being part of a purposeful Super Bowl over the last couple of years.
Yeah, so I think it links directly back to purpose. And so for me, I think my own personal experience has been, like you were saying, I've been on several different sides of several different fences. And having played basketball at Stanford, I got a scholarship to go there. That's how I afforded it. For me, I never went to the NBA. And I knew that was sort of my ceiling. And I wanted to go there because it was going to be a great education. So sports have always been a means to an end. My father was a middle school teacher and a coach. It was always drilled into me. And so when I got the call to talk to Daniel Lurie, the chairman of the bid, now the host committee, he said, look, we're trying to make this bigger than just a game. That's what I heard from him, and I said, I'm in. I don't even know what that means, but I'm in because it resonates with my own story. And I think the process itself, which I think we'll be able to get into a little bit more, has lived up to that. And I think the thing that I'm proudest of is what was alluded to at the end, that I think this is going to impact the way the next 50 Super Bowls approach things.
So let's just dive into the legacy topic a little bit. So, we use words like we want to make this the most sustainable and giving Super Bowl ever. It'll benefit the Bay Area for years to come. How's that legacy translating through the work that the 50 Fund are doing?
So I think the one thing and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, so okay, great. So I have actually taken odds with saying it's the most giving Super Bowl. I think it's the most philanthropic, because philanthropic is sort of a state of mind, a state of spirit. If the dollars end up $2 short, does that really matter? It's really about how we're approaching it and how we're going about doing it. So I think us being the most philanthropic, that ties into the original vision and purpose of using this stage and this game to leave a positive, lasting legacy. So the fact that rather than the philanthropic part of Super Bowl being an adjunct or an add-on, and hey, we'll add $1 million here, $2 million there. Rather than that, it was built into the business plan and front and center. And I think once that was the case, then the legacy, we went through a process of saying, if we had $10 million to invest in the community, how should we do it to create lasting positive legacy? And that's where we ended up coming up with our 3 pillars, which essentially are youth, community, and environment, but really around youth-centered on all of those things, because they're the ones who are going to carry forward that positive legacy.
And so what's on the scoreboard? How much money, how many organizations, how many kids?
So depends on how you want to do the metrics, but the ones that I'm particularly focused on, because the assets of the Super Bowl has helped us raise closer and give out over close to $12 million, but the directed dollars that the 50 fund has been, it's roughly $8 million. And to date, I believe that's been to just over 100 organizations. And the thing that I think, the fact that we wanted to throw down the gauntlet early, I'd heard Keith talk about it, but then for him to say, look, we want to make those first investments from the 50 fund a year out from the Super Bowl, to me, that was the right message to send. Right, Keith? That was the absolute right message. Yes, that's the right message. Yes. So it was.
I don't
I still want one of those pins. But I think that was the right thing. Look, if this really is built into the fabric of this event and then we need to do it early, not just some showy thing at the end or presenting a big check at halftime, although I would still love to do that if that's something that's on the table. But that isn't the point. Cheers. But the thing is, we really wanted to build it in. So I think that set the tone that, look, this is something bigger than just a show. It really is built into the DNA.
Right. So that's a great segue to you, Keith. Have you caught your breath?
I have, yes. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good to see you. Welcome to the 50 Club.
Keith has been an inspiration to work with. We've worked really closely together over the last 3 years. How many Super Bowls have you been to now?
This will be my 15th.
15th.
Yeah.
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a good thing. I've seen it grow up over time.
I've seen a lot. And so when we first started talking to each other, Keith, when we think back to, when was it, September 2013, when you joined the host committee.
That's right.
Really interested to understand the thought process that you went through to end up where we are today. Because we could have just done a normal Super Bowl in the traditional way, or you could have taken it in lots of different directions.
Sure.
What's the thought process that you went through that ended up in getting us to this point of purpose being embedded as who we are as an organization?
Yeah, I think from the very beginning we were trying to define our DNA, what we were going to be about as a host committee, what we wanted Super Bowl 50 to be remembered for. And you have to start that planning and establish how you want to ultimately be evaluated and measured that far in advance. And there's a reason the Super Bowl is awarded 3 years before it's actually played, because it takes that long to actually think through not just all the operations and the logistics and the delivery, and oh, by the way, you have to build a stadium, put your name on it, and do the things that we've done in that period of time. But when the host committee formed, we didn't have a stadium. It was a bowl of dirt at the time, and so it was a really great opportunity to be formative with how we ultimately wanted to establish our goals and what we wanted to accomplish. And so we knew we had technology going in our favor. The bid had promised to be the most giving Super Bowl ever, so that we knew philanthropy would be a big part of our DNA. But we wanted to take it a step further and continue to redefine the way the Super Bowl would be celebrated and presented to the world for Super Bowl 50. And one of those ways was, how can we be more sustainable? How can we embrace sustainability as a platform? My background is in large-scale global sporting events, and I spent a lot of time studying the London Olympic Games. We did a lot of work in my prior firm there. And I was really impressed with the way they embraced sustainability as a practice and embedding it within the organization. So I took some of that as a concept and working with Neill, who had done some work with, we've worked together at the America's Cup on some things, embracing sustainability and realizing that we had a chance to set a new bar in terms of a sustainable, not only just a sustainable Super Bowl, but something that really gave back to the environment as opposed to taking away from it. And so that's really how we established the vision. Net positive came a little bit later, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But I think the idea of being a sustainable Super Bowl and creating a new bar for the way sustainability is embedded throughout a global sports organization from beginning to end was really important.
Chip, coming over to you now. I mean, if I was to pick a handful of brands that kind of define what it means to be a purposeful organization, I'd pick Levi's as one of those organizations. It's something that you've really embraced and driven from a leadership perspective. I'm interested as to, I mean, you're very deeply embedded in football now, so you know, you have the stadium, you have all the other things that you do. But when Keith and Pat came knocking on the door asking for more cash for football and Super Bowl 50 host committee, what are the things that kind of resonated with you and gave you the comfort to partner with the host committee as an organization?
Well, I think first of all, you know, when you think about purpose, and thanks for the compliment about Levi's and Levi Strauss. It's interesting when I reflected on Jim's presentation. A lot of the companies that he flashed up there have been around for a really, really long time. Levi's has been around for almost 163 years. And I think a big part of the reason why we've been around that long is because we are a purpose-built company. Going all the way back to our founder, Levi Strauss himself, we talk about profits through principles. And we always try to do the right thing. And whether that's how we make our jeans, all the way through to how we show up this week and how we show up at the stadium. When Keith came knocking, actually he didn't really come knocking, we were talking really almost from day one. When we bid on the stadium and got the naming rights of the stadium, we had, you know, the bid process was already well underway. And we had a pretty good idea that there was a pretty high likelihood, at least 50%, because it was down to us in Miami, that we were going to wind up with Super Bowl 50, which I'm kind of bummed out they called it Super Bowl 50 and not Super Bowl L, because L is for Levi's, right?
Sorry, Chip.
By the way, and we're going for Super Bowl 56 next, which is LVI. Like, okay, missing this E. But
let's get that big going, right?
Yeah, we can work on that starting Monday. But we obviously, I mean, to bring the stadium to life and really maximize the real value out of it, it's all about how we activate. And we wanted to be part of this big event, and a big part of it. You know, we've got our pop-up shop right outside. You can all look at it, and please go over there later today. You can buy some beautiful apparel. Awesome. It really is awesome. We won a Net Impact Award for the store because it's the most sustainable thing in Super Bowl Village. And you know, we wanted to show up in a big way here because Monday's going to be here before you know it. So the Super Bowl is going to be history as of Monday morning. And we want people leaving the city, we want the fans that watch it in 189 countries around the world to say, wow, Levi's really showed up great. I want to be part of that brand.
So how important was the commitment to be this, however you describe it, most giving, most philanthropic, most sustainable, net positive, or most, not a most, I mean, to what extent did that factor into your
it was huge. I mean, I know Daniel Lurie really, really well, and we've been talking about this going back all the way to the point in time where we were starting to bid on the stadium and really going for the naming rights of the stadium. And again, I think this is going to make a lasting impact, and it's going to change the way major sporting events happen in the future. This is not a one-off. This becomes the new normal. And I think the challenge for the next Super Bowl committee is how do you take on the great work that this team and everybody who's been involved in this and take it to the next level. Because once the circus leaves town, so to speak, or, you know,
The city.
once all this is broken down, you know, what happens next year? And, you know, the challenge is how do you take this to the next level?
So I wanted to pick up on another point that Jim raised, which was about being purposeful is hard work. And I think having worked on a couple of these events now, I've started to recognize what the ingredients are for success. And Keith, I think one of those ingredients is leadership. It makes the difference between I think it's the single biggest reason between success and failure. And so I want to compliment you for the leadership that you played in helping to bring this forward. And to demonstrate that you actually know what we're talking about. Tell us what it means to be net positive and how we've actually executed that in terms of what we do.
Sure. Well, it goes back to the challenge I gave you, Neill, so right back at you. So I mentioned earlier how sustainability was going to be important to us as an operation, and not just the functional element of it, but how it actually presented itself through our work and through what you're seeing out here at Super Bowl City, which is the culmination of 2.5 years of hard work and planning. But the challenge is, how do you define sustainability? If I were to ask each and every one of you, define sustainability right now in one sentence, I would get 100 different answers, I would bet. And it's because everyone looks at it through a slightly different lens. And there is no real singular definition of sustainability, at least that I've seen in Webster's dictionary. And so the challenge is, okay, it's great you're going to say that, Keith, but what the hell does that mean, really? And how are you going to do it, more importantly? And so the idea came of, let's define sustainability through the eyes of the Super Bowl 50 host committee, through what we control, through working in partnership with the NFL and the NFL environmental group that Jack Rowe has been working so hard on for 20 years. So we at least had a base to work off of with the NFL and their 3R program, reuse, recycle, and repurpose. But we knew that was a starting point here in the Bay Area. You know, sustainability, the environment is so important to who we are as a region. And I think it also goes back to, how do we make this a distinctly Bay Area Super Bowl? You know, we're not Miami, we're not New Orleans, we're not Texas. We haven't had a Super Bowl in over 30 years, so we had this amazing canvas on which to paint on, and as it relates to how we would present the 50th Super Bowl, you know, to the world. And so the idea of being net positive really resonated, and simplifying it down to 4 core pillars of what that means, because I'm a big metrics guy. I believe at the end of the day, when we shut down on Monday, we start to wind this thing down, we have to be able to point to results. We have to be able to point to numbers. How much did we raise for the 50 fund? How much did we impact in terms of, you know, net impressions and goals? And so to define sustainability in a way that could be measured. So 4 very simple tenets. Number 1, how do we reduce our impact on climate change? And that's something, fortunately, we have a lot of resources here in the Bay Area. You know, there are alternative fuel generators that are powering Super Bowl City so that you don't have the off smells and the carbon going into the air. We've got alternative fuel vehicles. You know, our Google fleet that's running the Fan Express on Sunday is on renewable diesel from Neste. So we've got a lot of ways to do our part on that front in the operation. And so that first one is really positive. The second one was responsible use of materials and resources. How do we take the massive amount of stuff that's created for a Super Bowl? And it is massive in terms of just what we create on our own, but what's created by others who come here. And how do we find a home for that stuff when we're done? Churches and schools and places that can use the materials and use the food and use the elements that we've created, and having a plan going in. If you don't have that, if you wake up on Friday morning and go, ooh, I think I need to figure out where to put the food that's left over, you're done. You're done. You've waited too long. And so we started 2 years ago to say, let's get out in front of it and have a plan, so when we get to today, we know what we're going to do tomorrow. And so the idea of having a home for all of these things and making sure our diversion rates are as high as they can be and as successful as they can be, so that this stuff doesn't end up in a landfill, simply said. The third thing I think is the holy grail of sustainability within a global sporting event, and having seen certain events do it well, like the Vancouver Games, I thought was the first real global sporting event to embrace sustainability at its core. Because those games really, they cared about it. You know, the Vancouver region, the British Columbia, they cared about it. It was in their DNA like it is in ours. I know I keep using that word DNA, but I can't think of a better way to describe it. And so the idea of how do we get fans engaged in our sustainability initiatives, and more than just which color bin do I put my trash. You know, that's basically, you know, table stakes. Right now it's how do we create a program called Play Your Part, you know, and get people to actually take action and do things, whether it's take public transportation to Super Bowl City, whether it's bring your own water bottle and refill them at the stations. I know those sound like basic things, but if everybody did that, it would be amazing the difference it would make in terms of our input and our sustainability efforts. And then finally, you know, it's about the environment. That's true, but it's also about the social input and the social benefit that's created by being sustainable. And so the 50 Fund, thanks to Kamba, Jason, Daniel, and the visionaries that came up with this idea of being the most giving Super Bowl ever, and my job really is to execute on that vision. coming in, and overall I think the team's done a phenomenal job of making sure that we leave a social benefit for the region through the 50 Fund, right? So it's really establishing those 4 core pillars and then measuring our success against those 4.
So Kamba, something that Daniel, I know, has preached and lives every day is this message that it's not only important about how much you give, but how you give it. So tell us a little bit about that and how you've embraced that as the 50 Fund.
Yeah, so I think one of the best basketball coaches ever was John Wooden, and he was all about what's the process, and if you follow the process, you'll get to that end goal that you want. And my background being an executive in the nonprofit sector, there was often this talk of theory of change. So essentially, what's your hypothesis? How are you going to get there, and how will you know when you get there? And I think those things infused with a lot of the other great team members helped us figure out what we were going to be doing and how we would get there very intentionally. And I think that was the biggest thing that helped us figure out to get to that end goal. Because again, the end goal was to leave the positive lasting legacy. And then we started working backward. Well, how do we do that? Well, let's focus on youth, community, environment. Well, if we have these dollars to invest, how are we going to do it in a thoughtful way? So we actually set up, in addition to a board of directors, which is 15 strong, people from the corporate sector, nonprofit sector, private sector, tried to be a bit of a cross-section of the Bay Area, helping us figure out where those eventual dollars go. We also said, well, the most equitable way to do that is to have some sort of grant application. And so we opened that up using technology. But then I think one of the other key things we did was we engaged an advisory council. So in addition to the 15 board members, there was an advisory council of almost 25 people who have expertise. I know I've seen some of them in the room here who really did the heavy lifting. So one of the programs, we thought about how we were going to make impact at the grassroots level, at the regional level, and more at the national level. And we have programs along each of those buckets, if you will. And just for example, in understanding scope, the playmakers, so the smaller grants of $10,000 to smaller grassroots organizations to help them complete a project. We know we're not changing the world in doing that, but we know one of the things we have that's a very unique asset is visibility. So we wanted to use this stage to raise their visibility as well. We had, for the 50 grantees that we ended up selecting, we had to filter through 600 applications. And when I say we, it's really the advisory council. So I think it was a strong team that had a real goal and then sort of worked backward in terms of how are we going to get there in a very intentional manner.
Right. Chip, if I can come back to you now. So we've heard about purpose and we've heard about all this stuff, but at the end of the day, for a business to survive, it has to be profitable. Mm-hmm. So I'd be really interested to understand or to hear from you how the role that purpose plays in driving your business. Because it's not about hugging trees or doing that stuff. It's about embracing that, but for a reason. Right. To ensure the sustainability of what it is that we're trying to build.
Yeah, when I joined the company about 4.5 years ago, I had to remind people that profits through principle didn't mean we were a nonprofit organization. and actually linking our profitability to our ability to do good in the world. And essentially the way it works is the more money we make as a company, the more profitable we are, the more we can give back. And it is really that simple of a formula. So we've tried to pivot this notion of profit through principles to making a profit, and being profitable is an okay thing if you do the right thing with the profits that you're making. And so we execute a lot of our work in the world through the Levi Strauss Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization which the company funds. And we fund our foundation basically through the profitability of the company. And so the more money we make, the more money goes into that nonprofit organization, and the more then that we can do in the world. And it is good for business. I mean, this company has been around for 163 years, and I do believe a fundamental reason why is that purpose. Jim talked about how being purpose-driven can be a magnet for talent. And we've got people that joined Levi Strauss because of the work that we do in the community. Being a leader, being out in front, not afraid of sticking our neck out. And this company has a long history of taking a stand on important social issues. And I could go through the laundry list, but in the interest of time I won't. You can look them up. But we're not afraid to take a stand. We're not afraid to stand up for doing the right thing. And a big part of the reason why we did the stadium was we are a San Francisco-based company. We're damn proud of it. And this is a major, thing for the community and the Bay Area.
But there's a difference between doing well and then giving something back as an afterthought. To doing well and doing good and for being part of the organization, and you build it into your products.
Absolutely.
It's part of everything that you do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, for us to make the stadium deal work, if you will, it's a $220 million investment over 20 years, $11 million a year on average. We have to make it make sense. And so how we activate it, how we bring it to life, not just for the big game on Super Bowl Sunday, but throughout the year. Working with and partnering with the 49ers to make the experience there an amazing experience. And one that will stay with people so that they'll want to keep coming back. And there's a lot built into the stadium to do that.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Talk to us a bit about demographics as well, like the millennials, because I've heard kind of this purpose and profit. Can you tell us how that goes into your thinking as well, if at all?
It does. In fact, I was talking, I don't know if it was with Jim or somebody, I was talking to somebody just earlier this morning about how important, sustainability, broadly defined, is to the millennial generation, and now Generation Z coming behind them. Even the really, really young people, and this is not just a US phenomenon, right? It is truly a global phenomenon. Young people really do care about the planet. And I think it's our responsibility, at least people kind of in my generation, which, scanning the room, there are a lot of us. We have a responsibility to try to leave the world in a better place than it was when we inherited it. Because if it keeps going in the direction that it's going, our children and their children are not going to have the world that we grew up in. And so I do think we have a responsibility. Millennials really deeply care about this. Deeply, and I do believe longer term, and Jim probably has data on this, that over time it will be a differentiator. Purpose is a differentiator if you really get it right, and people will choose your brand, choose your company, if they know that you stand for the right thing.
I would echo on that because we did some research early on with the host committee just to get an understanding of what the different segments out there thought of the idea of Super Bowl 50 coming to the region. And we've been out long enough to promote what we were about and our values and our stances, including the most giving. The two groups that we resonated with the most, this was 1 year ago, were millennials and women. And this is the NFL, this is the National Football League, this is Super Bowl 50. And the work that the host committee was doing at that time, in terms of being the most giving and the 50 fund, and our sustainability models, and how we were trying to make a difference with this Super Bowl, those are the two groups that we resonated with the most. And I think that motivated us even more to continue to work with our partners, like Levi is another. Every single partner that you see out there has some kind of sustainability element woven into their presentation. And everyone now is embracing that as a strategic advantage. And I think that's the one point that I would add on to my comment earlier about how the host committee has embraced sustainability as a business practice. We've moved from the days of where sustainability was seen as a financial disadvantage. Oh my God, I got to put 2 more of these, green companies into my RFP, and I got to make sure it's all balanced, and it's got to go through purchasing in the right way, and it's what a hassle, right? I just need to be able to do my thing and put it on the track. And so it takes a little bit of time and patience to pull back from that as an organization. And as you can see, we needed a lot of production companies, a lot of contractors, a lot of partners to help us produce what we're producing here this week with Super Bowl 50. And we asked all of them to embrace the values that we're embracing as it relates to what are you doing as a company to give back to the community? What are you doing to help the environment in terms of your business practices and how you ultimately produce what you're going to produce for us as a host committee? So we just flipped it on its ear and we said, we're going to go from this notion of it being a financial disadvantage to being a strategic advantage for the host committee and ultimately for our partners as we present Super Bowl 50, not only to the Bay Area, but to the world.
Well, we've run out of time, and I'm going to ask one final question of you, Keith. I don't know whether you've seen this stuff, because I know you've been busy the last few days, but just some headings from the media in the last 48 hours. So Forbes this Sunday, the greenest and most philanthropic Super Bowl ever. Collectively, 12 reasons San Francisco Super Bowl is about to change football forever. Green Sports Alliance president says Super Bowl 50, greening unmatched. So those are pretty cool accolades. What's the challenge that you as the CEO of the host committee put out, not only to future host committees and the NFL, but to other major sporting events around the world, having lived through all of this and seen that it works?
One of the motivating factors of why we did what we did is to influence future global sporting events, as Chip said, going forward. I mean, we're doing it for us, but we're also doing it for everyone else too. And we're not going to be the last major sporting event on the planet, that's for sure. The Super Bowl is an annual event. It's the single largest annual sporting event in the world, so it does have a major position of influence as it relates to how sustainability can move going forward. We've got the Olympics now moving at a rapid fire pace. The next 3 or 4 sites are chosen. And it doesn't have to be big scale events like that. It can be any event where you're aggregating people who are passionate about a particular sport or event or activity, and they're creating a celebration. And that's really the idea here, is how can you start early enough so that when it comes time to execute, right? Because it's all in the execution. You can say this stuff all day long, and you can pass around a bunch of papers, and you can hand around files, but if you don't do it, if you don't actually put it in play and take the stance and ask our partners to be able to join us in that effort and stay true to that model, it doesn't matter.
So, final question, would you do it the same way again?
For the most part, yes. I mean, I think we're seeing, those headlines are there for a reason. We didn't just make this stuff up. We're practicing what we're preaching. We've got great partners doing the same thing. I will say that stadium gave us a huge, I might not have been quite as confident in taking such an aggressive stance on sustainability and the environment if we did not have Levi Stadium and the model that we were looking at, what that was going to represent in terms of LEED Gold right out of the gate, aspiring for platinum status. We knew that was going to be a game changer stadium that would set the bar. And so much of what we did in the early days of the host committee, whether it was the technology or the sustainability elements, was motivated and inspired by Levi Stadium. Right. I think we're seeing that now.
Right. Kamba, Chip, and Keith, thank you so much. Thank you for listening to us.